The day began like any other in Harmony, a small town in Texas where ranches stretch as far as the eye can see, and the summer heat embraces everything with intensity. Early in the morning, vintage pickup trucks rumbled down the dusty streets, carrying families toward churches, barbershops, or the Saturday farmers market. At the corner diner beside the old gas station, a few locals gathered, talking about the Cowboys' latest game and the stubborn rise of gasoline prices. Amid the easy smiles and lazy nods of greeting, a newcomer appeared on the main sidewalk. Caroline moved with quiet confidence, her worn jeans, scuffed leather boots, and plain gray t-shirt making her blend naturally into the rustic setting. Her auburn hair was tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and the sun had already begun to pink the back of her neck. Caroline had been driving east from El Paso after attending a veterans conference. On a whim, and at the suggestion of some old friends from her battalion, she decided to stop in Harmony to check out a shooting range known for its facilities. It seemed like just another small-town pit stop. She had no idea the visit would become something much larger. The shooting range parking lot wasn't full. A few beat-up trucks and SUVs sat in the midday heat, some bearing patriotic bumper stickers, others flying small faded American flags from the antennas. Caroline paused before stepping inside, breathing in the thick, sun-baked air. Memories of ranges and battlegrounds filtered through her mind, stirring a ripple of anxiety under her otherwise calm surface. Inside, the reception was typical, a bit curious but polite. A balding man with thick glasses manned the front desk and offered a welcoming smile. "Howdy, miss. Here to watch the demonstrations, or try your hand. Just looking to practice a bit," Caroline replied warmly. "Well, you're welcome here." He handed her a clipboard. "Just fill this out. We'll get you set up." As Caroline sat down to complete the form, several men ambled in carrying gun cases and ammunition boxes. Conversations paused for brief moments as eyes flicked toward her. Some of the looks were curious, others skeptical. Nobody said anything at first, but Caroline could feel the weight of their stares. After a few minutes, a tall man wearing a baseball cap with a Texas flag stitched on the front approached her. He had the easy stride of a local who knew everyone in town. "Name's Wyatt," he said, offering a smile that didn't quite hide the underlying test in his voice. "You're not from around here, are you?" "Nope," Caroline replied, her voice steady but friendly. "Just passing through. Heard this range is worth visiting." Wyatt gave a slow nod, his eyes sweeping over her with faint skepticism. "We got good facilities, sure. Folks around here, though, well, we don't often see women shootin' serious." Caroline returned his gaze evenly. "Maybe that's gonna change," she said with a half-smile. Wyatt chuckled and sauntered back toward his group, who had clearly been watching the exchange. Caroline finished the paperwork, retrieved a few boxes of 9mm rounds, and headed toward the firing bays. The setup was impressive, electronic targets that moved at various distances, sturdy partitions between each station, and a layout that made real tactical practice possible. She placed her sports bag in a locker, strapped on her ear protection, and selected a 9mm pistol from the rental rack. As she chambered around and checked the sights, she could hear the low mutterings from the group of men lingering by the entrance. "Think she knows what she's doing?" one of them murmured. "Hope she don't shoot herself in the foot," another snickered. Caroline closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself. She had heard worse before, in places far more dangerous than a dusty Texas town. Without a word, she took her stance, lifted the pistol, and squeezed off a few slow, deliberate shots. The bullets punched through the center of the target cleanly. She reloaded, adjusted her breathing, and began running through a series of faster drills. Each movement was crisp, efficient, trained through countless repetitions during her Army years. One by one, the nearby shooters stopped firing to watch. That's when another man, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, wearing camouflage pants and a tight black t-shirt, swaggered over. His name, she would later learn, was Mitch. "You might want to try this lil .22, Mitch said, holding out a lighter pistol with a grin. "Easier for someone like you." Caroline looked at the offered pistol for a beat, then shook her head. "I'm fine with the 9, she said evenly. Mitch chuckled as if expecting her to change her mind after a few shots. "Don't say I didn't warn ya." Caroline said nothing. She didn't need to. She returned to her bay, reset the target, and continued firing, this time transitioning between multiple targets with smooth, deadly precision. It wasn't long before Wyatt returned, carrying his custom AR-15. "Hey, Caroline, want to give this a try? Just got a new sight mounted." Caroline accepted the rifle, feeling its weight in her hands. She ran a quick function check, confirming the safeties and optics, her movements automatic but thorough. Wyatt watched, eyebrows lifting in appreciation. "You seem like you know your way around," he said, curiosity overtaking skepticism. "Military?" Caroline hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Served for a few years." Wyatt's respect was immediate. He grinned. "Well, good on you. Maybe you can show Mitch over there how it's done." The comment drew laughter from a few of the others, but Mitch didn't find it amusing. Arms crossed, muscles flexed for intimidation, he stepped closer. "Tell you what," Mitch said. "How about a friendly little competition? See who's really got the skills." Caroline shrugged, casual and cool. "Sure. Why not?" The group buzzed with excitement as they made their way to the outdoor field, a wide-open shooting lane bordered by low mesquite trees and dry prairie grass. Targets were set at 50 and 70 meters, sturdy steel silhouettes that would ring loud when struck. The instructor, a grizzled man with a headset slung around his neck, outlined the rules. 3 targets, 2 distances, 3 rounds each. Fastest and most accurate shooter wins. Mitch fired first. His shots were good but not great. He hesitated slightly between targets, needing a few seconds to adjust. When he finished, a few friends clapped politely, but it was clear he hadn't dominated. Then it was Caroline's turn. She took her stance, feet grounded, rifle tucked firmly against her shoulder. When the instructor signaled, she moved fluidly. First target, ping. Second, ping. Third, ping. Her time was nearly half of Mitch's. The onlookers erupted, gasps, whistles, murmurs of genuine amazement. Mitch tried again but couldn't close the gap. Caroline, staying calm, improved her time on the second run. When the final scores were tallied, it wasn't even close. The instructor raised a hand. "Winner, Caroline." A hush fell over the group. Some adjusted their caps, a traditional gesture of respect. Others approached cautiously, as if still trying to understand what they had witnessed. Mitch approached, his face a mix of wounded pride and reluctant admiration. He extended a rough hand. "All right," he said. "You got me. Respect where it's due. But tell me, how'd you get so damn good?" Caroline smiled faintly. "I was an Army elite marksman. Did recon missions, supported ground units. Spent more years training than I care to count." The weight of her words settled in. The respect in the air was palpable now, almost heavy. Wyatt came over next, eyes bright with admiration. "That's incredible," he said. "You hear about stuff like that, but meeting someone in person, it's different." Caroline shrugged. "It's not all glory. Mostly discipline, patience, and understanding that every shot has meaning." As the sun slid lower in the sky, the once skeptical crowd became genuinely welcoming. Conversations shifted from cautious small talk to animated storytelling. Some men shared stories of relatives who had served. Others asked for shooting tips. A boy about 15, wearing a Dallas Cowboys cap too big for his head, approached shyly. "You were amazing," he said, voice cracking. "I want to be like you someday." Caroline knelt slightly, so they were eye level. "You'll be even better," she said. "Just remember, respect the weapon, respect yourself, and never stop learning." The boy grinned from ear to ear. An older man, hair white and face lined from decades under the sun, leaned on his Winchester and said, "My granddaughter's been wanting to learn to shoot. Always told her it wasn't for girls. Maybe I ought to rethink that." Caroline smiled warmly. "It's never too late to learn something new." Later, Mitch returned, the arrogance stripped away. "Hey," he said, awkward but genuine. "Sorry for being a jerk. Buy you a beer?" Caroline considered, then nodded. "Sure. Why not?" They made their way to the local diner, a no-frills place with cracked linoleum floors, greasy burgers, and the best milkshakes in Harmony. Inside, the usual patrons fell into easy chatter and laughter as Caroline and her new acquaintances swapped stories over burgers and cold beers. Inevitably, talk returned to military life. "You think it's like the movies?" someone asked. Caroline shook her head. "Not even close. It's hours of waiting, days without sleep, wind calculations, psychological weight. Every pull of the trigger means something real." There was a silence after that, filled with respect. When Caroline finally rose to leave, the entire diner gave her a standing round of applause. She chuckled, embarrassed but touched. Wyatt followed her out to the truck. "If you're ever back in Harmony," he said, "you got friends here." Caroline smiled, jingling her keys. "Thanks. I think I will." She climbed into her battered pickup, started the engine, and paused a moment to breathe in the night air. Crickets chirped in the distance, and the Milky Way stretched out overhead like a painted road across the sky. Driving away, Caroline knew she had changed something that day, not just in the perception of a small Texas town, but inside herself as well. The battles she'd fought, seen and unseen, had been worth it. Not every victory was measured by territory gained. Some were measured by hearts changed, respect earned, and old prejudices quietly, finally falling away. The road unwound before her, endless and free. Caroline smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years, her spirit carried forward by the dust and stars of Texas. Caroline drove on, the town of Harmony shrinking in her rearview mirror. The open Texas landscape stretched endlessly ahead, a canvas of gold and green under the falling night. Her thoughts wandered, not to distant battlefields or old regrets, but to the simple kindness she'd found that day. It had been years since she'd felt so at ease, so welcome. Not because of what she said, but because of what she showed. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the night. After half an hour on the empty road, Caroline spotted a flickering neon sign advertising a roadside motel. She hadn't planned to stop, but the day's events had left her pleasantly exhausted. Inside the small lobby, the desk clerk barely looked up, handing her a room key with a muttered, "Room 12" around the back. Caroline thanked him, grabbed a soda from a vending machine humming tiredly in the corner, and found her way to the room. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, letting the day settle into her bones. Setting her gear on the bed, she unpacked the essentials: pistol, ammunition, a battered notebook, and an old photo, a group shot of her unit from years ago, some faces lost to time, others burned deep into memory. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Caroline flipped open the notebook. Pages filled with observations, old training techniques, even quick sketches of firing positions. She had kept it throughout her career, part habit, part therapy. She added a simple line: Harmony TX, where old walls came down. Progress one shot at a time. Setting the notebook aside, she finally allowed herself to relax. Morning came too early, but greeted her with a crispness to the air that hadn't been there the day before. The oppressive heat had lifted slightly, replaced by a gentle breeze. Caroline stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulders, remnants of long rucks and harder days. After checking out, she stopped at a tiny diner next to the motel for breakfast. The kind of place where the menu was laminated and everyone ordered either the usual or something with bacon. While waiting for her coffee, Caroline caught fragments of a conversation from the booth behind her. Two men in oil-stained overalls were discussing the previous day's events at the shooting range. "You should have seen her," one said, voice filled with awe. "Fastest damn shootin' I've ever seen. And calm. Not like she was trying to prove nothing. Just did it. Don't reckon Mitch'll ever live that down," the other chuckled. Caroline smiled into her coffee cup. By mid-morning, she was back on the road, but something tugged at her, an idea she couldn't quite shake. About an hour east of Harmony, she spotted a weathered sign pointing toward an abandoned training facility once used by local law enforcement. The range had fallen into disrepair years ago, but Caroline remembered hearing about it at the conference. A few veterans had dreams of reopening it, turning it into a place where anyone, regardless of background, could learn to handle firearms responsibly. Curiosity piqued, she turned off the main road and followed a winding dirt track until the ruins of the facility came into view. Rusted fences, cracked concrete, weeds creeping through the gravel. But the bones were good. The layout was right. Walking through the crumbling structures, Caroline's boots crunched over broken glass and sun-bleached shells. She could almost hear the echoes of training drills, the barked commands of instructors long gone. She wasn't sure when the idea fully took root. Maybe somewhere between the shattered shooting booths and the derelict observation tower. But when it did, it struck like lightning. She could do it. She could rebuild this place. Not for profit. Not for fame. For the next generation. For the girl whose grandfather had second thoughts. For the shy boy in the cowboy's cap. For every outsider who had been told they didn't belong on the firing line. A place where skill mattered more than appearance. A place where no one would underestimate someone like Caroline again. The decision was made in an instant. She didn't question it. She hadn't survived the worst the world had to offer, only to ignore a calling now. By evening, Caroline was back in Harmony. When she walked into the diner, the conversation dipped for just a moment. Enough for every regular to notice her return. Wyatt stood up from a booth and waved her over. "You're back sooner than expected." Caroline slid into the booth opposite him, smiling slightly. "I found something. About an hour east. Old training grounds. Thought maybe we could talk about fixing it up." Wyatt leaned in, curious. "Fix it up for what?" "For anyone who wants to learn. Caroline said simply. Proper training. Safety first. Respect, discipline, the whole deal. And no more assumptions about who belongs. Wyatt sat back, whistling low. That's one hell of an idea. Figured Harmony could use a place like that. Wyatt grinned. I think you're right. It didn't take long for the word to spread. By the time Caroline finished her burger, several others had gathered around. Mitch included, sheepish but supportive. You serious about this? Mitch asked, scratching the back of his neck. Dead serious, Caroline said. You'll need help, Mitch said. Cleaning that place up, fixin' the fences, making it safe. I'll take all the help I can get, Caroline replied. Plans formed quickly, supplies needed, volunteers to recruit, permits to consider. Wyatt promised to talk to the town council. Mitch offered the use of his pickup and some tools. Others chimed in, small offers but sincere. By the time Caroline headed to the old motel that night, her mind buzzed with plans. Work began the next day. They started by clearing debris, pulling weeds, and patching fences. Caroline worked alongside them, sleeves rolled up, sweat running down her back. She was no longer just a visitor. She was part of something. And the town noticed. Teenagers showed up first, curious and eager to learn. Wyatt's niece, a whip-smart girl with a stubborn streak, asked if she could learn how to shoot. My uncle says girls can be better than boys if they train harder, she said defiantly. Caroline smiled. Your uncle's right. Then came the older folks, the ones who had first doubted her. They brought homemade lunches, coolers of lemonade, and stories of old ranges, old battles, old regrets. Harmony itself seemed to shift, growing a little lighter, a little more open. The range wasn't perfect. The concrete was still cracked. The wind still whistled through the broken observation tower. But it was alive again. 2 weeks later, they held their first official training day. Mitch, now one of Caroline's most vocal supporters, stood by her side as kids and adults alike lined up for safety briefings. Caroline's voice carried clear across the field. Respect the weapon. Respect yourself. Learn first, then practice. When the first shot rang out, a sharp, clean crack, it wasn't just a bullet hitting steel. It was history falling away. It was a future being built. Later that afternoon, after the last targets had been cleared and the range began to empty, Caroline sat on the tailgate of Wyatt's truck, watching the sun sink low over the prairie. Wyatt handed her a cold soda. You did good, Caroline, he said simply. She smiled, tired but proud. We did good. From then on, Harmony had a new place on the map. A place where skill was measured not by appearance, but by patience, discipline, and respect. And Caroline, once a stranger, now a builder of dreams, knew she had found something she hadn't even realized she was looking for. Home. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you make, one small victory at a time. And as the last light faded into a velvet Texas night, Caroline knew. The battles of the past had shaped her. But it was the battles for the future, fought with hope, not bullets, that would define her legacy. She breathed deeply, savoring the cool night air, and for the first time in a long, long while, she allowed herself to believe that peace, real, lasting peace, might just be within reach. The next few months passed in a blur of hard work and slow victories. Word about the new training range spread beyond Harmony. Neighboring towns sent curious visitors, ranchers, retired military, young folks eager to learn. Caroline made sure every person who crossed through the battered gates learned two things before they ever picked up a weapon: respect for the responsibility they were undertaking, and the discipline it required. She structured the program like the Army had taught her, but softened the edges. Classes began with safety briefings, drills without ammunition, focus on posture, breathing, and mindfulness. Caroline taught them not just how to shoot, but when not to shoot, when to wait, when to walk away. Mitch turned out to be one of her most reliable assistants, though he still grumbled about the early hours. Wyatt handled the paperwork in town council meetings, lobbying for small grants to repair the observation tower and upgrade the fencing. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. There were skeptics, of course. One afternoon, a man named Carl showed up, mid-40s, sporting a permanent frown and a suspicious attitude. He watched Caroline from the sidelines, arms crossed, lips tight. You really think teaching kids to shoot's a good idea? He asked bluntly during a break. Caroline wiped sweat from her brow and turned to face him. I think teaching them to respect firearms is a good idea. Better they learn right than wrong. Carl grunted, unconvinced. But the next week, he brought his teenage daughter to class. Small victories. Late one evening, after the last car had rolled away and the desert had reclaimed its silence, Caroline sat alone on the firing line. She set up 3 metal targets, just like that first day in Harmony, and worked through her old drills. Breathe. Sight. Squeeze. Ping. 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 She wasn't chasing speed now. She was chasing precision. Consistency. Calm. When she finally lowered her weapon, the stars had spilled across the night sky, brilliant and endless. She sat on the ground, boots in the dust, rifle resting across her lap, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself just be still. The memories came, uninvited but no longer overwhelming. Faces of friends lost. Missions completed. Moments of terror and triumph. They were part of her. Always would be. But so was this, the laughter of kids on the range. The cautious pride of parents watching their children learn. The slow but steady change in a town's heart. And she realized she wasn't just training shooters. She was teaching something deeper. Confidence. Responsibility. Community. Harmony had become more than a stopover. It had become part of her story. One Saturday in mid-October, the town organized a small festival around the range's success. They called it Heritage and Honor Day. A mix of barbecue cook-offs, shooting demonstrations, and live country music. Booths lined the edges of the town square, homemade banners flapping in the breeze. Caroline tried to stay in the background. She wasn't comfortable with attention, but people kept pulling her into conversations, introducing her to cousins, uncles, grandparents. "You're the one who taught my daughter to shoot straight," one man said, clapping her on the back. "My son won't shut up about safety drills," another added, laughing. The gratitude was overwhelming. Unfamiliar, but welcome. Toward sunset, Wyatt found her sitting at the edge of the square, sipping lemonade. "Got something for you," he said, handing over a small, square box. Caroline eyed it warily. "I don't do trophies." Wyatt chuckled. "Just open it." Inside was a simple bronze plaque. No grand titles, no bragging. Just, Caroline Marshall, for building a bridge where none stood. For aiming true, not just with bullets, but with heart. Caroline swallowed hard. She closed the box gently and looked up at Wyatt. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "No," Wyatt agreed. "But you started it, and you saw it through." Behind them, the town band started playing an old country tune. Laughter and the smell of barbecue filled the air. Kids raced around, chasing each other between booths. Old-timers leaned back in lawn chairs, swapping stories about how it used to be. Caroline watched it all, a lump forming in her throat. She thought back to the day she'd first walked into Harmony. The side glances, the whispered doubts, the silent challenges. And she thought about now, about this place she had helped change without firing a single shot in anger. The real victories, she realized, were the ones you didn't fight with fists or rifles. They were fought with patience, with resilience, with the simple act of showing up, again and again, until the world couldn't help but change around you. As the first stars appeared, Caroline made her way back to her truck. She paused for a moment, watching the lights of Harmony twinkle behind her. The road ahead was still long. There would always be another town, another challenge, maybe even another range to rebuild someday. But for now, she was content to stay a while longer. Harmony still had lessons to teach her, and she had more to give in return. She started the engine, the familiar rumble comforting her, and pulled onto the open road once more. In the rearview mirror, Harmony grew smaller, but it wasn't fading away. It had become part of her, a permanent mark, a new chapter. The night wrapped around her like a blanket. The stars stretched endlessly above. And as she drove, Caroline felt something rare and precious settle deep inside her. Not just pride, peace. The kind you earn, the kind you fight for, the kind you build one person, one small town at a time. Weeks turned into months. The training ground Caroline helped revive thrived beyond her expectations. It grew into more than a range. It became a gathering place, a classroom, a second home for those who needed it. Veterans came not just to shoot, but to reconnect. Teenagers came not just to practice, but to learn confidence. Even skeptics like Carl ended up volunteering on weekends. Caroline kept her promise to herself. She taught discipline, respect, patience. And in return, she found something she hadn't realized she was missing: community. Harmony accepted her fully now, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it, quietly through action. Late one Sunday, after another full day of training sessions, Caroline sat alone in the now familiar firing line. The range was empty. The air was cooling into that perfect desert crispness that only Texas evenings could bring. She looked around at the refurbished booths, the fresh-painted steel targets, the sturdy fencing. She thought about the kids who no longer flinched when handling a firearm, about the women who walked in curious and walked out confident, about the men who realized strength had nothing to do with gender, and everything to do with will. She realized something simple but powerful. Her mission was never really about proving herself. It was about paving the way, making sure others didn't have to fight the same battles of doubt and prejudice she once faced. Caroline stood, dusting off her jeans. She locked up the gates, hung the keys on the old peg inside the office, and walked toward her truck under a sky burning with stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Maybe new students. Maybe someone new would walk into Harmony with fire in their heart and doubt in their mind. If they did, they would find not just a shooting range, but a place that believed in them before they even fired a single shot. Caroline started the engine, rolled down the window, and for a long moment simply sat there, listening to the hum of crickets, the whisper of the breeze through mesquite branches. She smiled, a deep, quiet, unshakable smile. Because in Harmony, she hadn't just found a place to sharpen her skills. She had found a place to heal, to rebuild, to belong. The dust stirred behind her as she pulled onto the road, the headlights slicing through the dark. She wasn't running from anything now. She was moving forward, always forward. The range would be there, ready for whoever needed it next. And Caroline Marshall, soldier, teacher, builder of bridges, would be ready too. Because sometimes the greatest missions aren't fought overseas. They're fought, and won, in the hearts of people brave enough to believe that change is possible. And Harmony, Texas, would never be the same again.